Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to every single .NET 9 feature that you should actually know about. And I'm saying that because many things have been added, but most of them or many of them are just niche things no one will really use. Here I'm going to show you things you will actually use, and I'm going to focus on .NET itself, things you can use with everything, not just ASP.NET Core, not just EF Core, not just Blazor, just general things that will affect everyone who will upgrade to .NET 9. And the first one is a really cool one. It's called feature switching. Now, feature switching is basically feature flagging, but with Microsoft's built-in support. And yeah, we finally got it. So how does that look? Well, imagine I have over here a feature class, a class that just contains some feature. And then I have a method called do the thing. And when you call it, it says I did the thing or I did the thing. And I want to only enable this for some executions of my application. And think of this like A/B testing, or think of this like feature switching, as the name implies, which might mean that I only want to turn this feature on for some deployments of this application, because I want to do some A/B testing, I want to see if it works as I expected, and so on. And what you can now do is you can say static bool, that's just an example, but you need a property for this. So let's say I have a property called is feature enabled, and then I'm going to say app context dot try get switch, or you can say get switch as well. And I'm just going to say try get switch over here. And then you're going to have the switch name. In this case, just keep it simple. I'm going to say feature dot is enabled. And then we have out var is enabled. So what you can say is if a value could be extracted, then return is enabled. Otherwise, return true. And you can actually simplify this even better by using a conditional operator. Here we go. So now I can go over here and I can say if feature dot is feature enabled, then feature dot do the thing. And it's just going to print in the console. So if I just run this as it is, what you're going to see is that I am going to get the thing printed, because I have to specify whether I want this feature to be on or off somewhere. I also need to mark it as like a feature switch. So the first thing I have to do is I have to say over here, feature switch definition, and I'm going to have to put the name. This only works with properties. If I was to turn this into a method, it wouldn't work. So keep that in mind. You might have to forward any method invocations. So now that I have this, I can go to the CS proj, and by the way, any parameters here can be passed down as arguments when you publish or when you run. So keep that in mind as well. You don't have to have everything in here. You can have it as a command as well. And now we can say item group, and we can use the runtime host configuration option parameter. And we can say include feature dot is enabled, the same name as the switch. And then the value here is false. So the feature is turned off. We have this trim equals true too, which I'm going to touch in a second. But now if I run this, we don't see anything in the console because this flag is false. If I turn it into true and I run it again, then what you're going to see is what you'd expect. Now, I kind of touched on this, but the benefit of this is that if this project was actually AOT enabled, ahead of time compilation enabled, this would also trim out the code of any publishing that has this flag marked as false, because the feature is disabled, so you don't need the code. So we just go ahead and just remove the code itself, not just keep an if check that you have to go through every single time. It's very clever, very cool feature. The next one is link. Some really cool things have been added in link, mainly performance improvements, but also a couple of methods that heavily simplified my life, because I've been using this for the past 8 to 7 months, even in preview, because they just simplified my code so much. Now let me explain what I mean. And I'm actually going to use the real example of how I use these things in production on DomeTrain, my courses learning platform. So let's say I want to track how long some student has watched a lesson for. So I have a record to represent this. I have a course ID, lesson ID, and lesson duration in seconds. And then I want to calculate the total watch time of a course so I can pay out my authors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say total watch time, and I'm going to store a tuple of a course ID and then the lesson duration by seconds. And then I have just the dummy list over here with like ID1, lesson 1 was watched for 434 seconds, course 1, lesson 2 for so much, and so on. And then I'm just looping around and I'm adding them. Now, ultimately what I want to do here is I want to group by the course ID, and I want to summarize all the seconds. Now, traditionally, what I'd have to do is like total watch time group by, then I would have to group by something. So I would have to say like tuple.course ID. Then I would have to say like select, and like that's, yeah, it worked. We had a way to do it, but it was just a lot. So what you can do now is the following. You can say course watch time equals total watch time dot the new aggregate by method. Awesome method. And then you can say aggregated by what? Well, it's the course ID. We're going to start with 0 on the clock. So 0M over here, because we want to calculate the seconds per thing, and we're going to store, and we're going to start from 0. It's basically called the seed selector in case you want to pre-populate any data. And then we're going to say seconds and item. And I'm going to say decimal dot add seconds, and then item dot lesson duration by seconds. It's simple as that. No group bys, no selects, no fancy logic. All I need to do now is just say for each course watch time, and then I'm just going to say like pair, and then I'm just going to print course ID was watched for this many seconds. So if I go ahead and I just run this, then as you're going to see, it works. And it's awesome. Now, this is not the only method that was added. There was also another method. Let's say I want to see how many times each lesson over here has been watched. So I want to count them, but I want to count by, which is the other method that was added. Same thing as before for each. And I can say over here, completed lessons dot count by, and I want to count by what? Well, I want to count by the lesson ID, and then all I have to do is say lesson ID was watched this many times. I run my code and it all works. I can see how many times each lesson was watched because I have lesson 1, 1, and 1, 3 times, 1, 2, 1, 3. Now this wouldn't actually be like that because the lesson IDs on each course are different. So this would be like 4 and this would be like 5. Anyway, the point is this can significantly simplify your code. I personally use it on DOMTrain, and actually we just released on DOMTrain our Black Friday discount. So until the 2nd of December, for a very limited supply, you can use discount code Black Friday 24 at checkout to get 40% off everything. That is courses, already discounted bundles, or your first year of DOMTrain Pro, giving you access to every single course on our platform. Don't miss the chance. It's great opportunity, and we have so many more courses coming. You don't want to miss. Now back to the video. Okay, so the next one is on one of our favorite C# types, if not our favorite, spans. So spans have gotten a few very significant upgrades, but I'm going to start from the first kind of mind-blowing one, because I don't think you've ever seen something like this before, and I haven't seen it either, to be honest. Now, everyone knows that, let's say I have hello world as text. So I have hello world, right? Now, everyone knows, I think, I would hope so, that this is a string, right? But a string can also be represented in C# as a read-only span of characters, because this is just pointers pointing to the location of the characters in memory. And the benefit of this is you can actually do some really efficient operations with spans, or pass down spans in methods that accept them to save on allocations and so on. Now let's assume that I have the following dictionary. Let's say that I have this var dic over here, and I have the first key over here be hello and pointing to just some number, and then world pointing to just some other number. This indicates a splitting on the comma, which is true. The idea is that you somehow split this on a comma, and then you use that split variable to get the number allocated to each value over here. Now, if you were to do this the traditional way, which is dic, and then assume that this was actually a string, and you did hello world, and you split on that comma over here, and you get the first one. So if I do that, by the way, it will actually work. In fact, I should probably just print this over here. So console.writeLine, and then print. If I did that, what you're going to get is just that first random number, right? It makes sense. But the problem is that this now just allocated a new array of strings and 2 new strings to store these split strings, which I actually don't want to. We just did this to be able to get this thing because the key here happens to be a string. Wouldn't it be just awesome if in some way I could say that this is a read-only span and then use a span of just the key to get something from a dictionary? Well, now we can. What we can do now is the following. We can say var split range equals hello world.split, which is, by the way, also new. Now you can split on a span. And now I can say, let's say for each split a range and then a range over here. And I can say var key or just text is the hello world and then pass a range. And that range will give me a read-only span that reflects that value. So if I just quickly say console.this and then print the key, of course I have to string it. At this point, defeating the allocation benefit, but I'm just doing this to show you what's going on. So now I split those two things. And in fact, I should probably just put this back here and put the exclamation mark. But now I have this read-only span, but I can't really use it over here with a dictionary, right? Because it doesn't support it. But what I can do is I can do the following. I can go up here and say var alt dic, and I can say dic dot get alternative lookup. And I can say that get an alternative lookup with the key being a read-only span of characters. And now if I use this alt dic over here, I can say this, pass down the key, and now this key, this dictionary is not a copied, but just an efficient way of getting the value out of here. And I can say write line, and I'm going to just print the number because this is an integer. So I'm not allocating a substring anymore, and I can just get the value type, which also doesn't allocate. Yes, it will allocate over here being boxed to be printed as a string on the console. But other than that, this is just some incredibly efficient operations. I'm going to run this to see that, yeah, this all works. I can get the two values out of the dictionary without using a string, but using a read-only character. Extremely good. Another thing is that now we also have a read-only set, and you can have a read-only set for string over here, for example. So we didn't have this. Finally, we do. If you were to use it, it would look kind of like this. So you have a hash set, you populate it somehow, and then you create the read-only set out of the hash set, and it all works, and happy days. That's basically it. But let's just assume the following. I'm going to go down here and just for now comment this one out, but you can actually download the code from the description down below and practice those features. But what I can say now is the following. So C# supports this thing called the parameters keyword, and we can use the parameters keyword with an IEnumerable of some type. This means that basically now we can have n amount of values in this method, and it's going to be passed down. And in this case, I'm going to just use it to get the sum and then print the sum. So if I just have these numbers over here, I can do this with parameters and it all works fine. It has worked fine for a very long time. However, it's extremely inefficient. And even though it has become more and more efficient as the time goes by, it is not great because of all the allocations associated with this. For example, if I just build this project and go to the IL viewer again, what you're going to see is that we have this array allocated now over here for these values, which by the way would also be allocated. I mean, it wouldn't really be allocated because it uses array.empty, which is very efficient, but it would still be here and then be put into an IEnumerable. It's not the end of the world, that one. But if I build it and I have some parameters over here, then as you're going to see, I have this array being allocated, we're storing everything here, and then we're printing it. Is not really the same thing as it would have been if these things were individual parameters on the method. Now, the benefit of having something so flexible might outweigh the allocation, but Microsoft thought, why don't we just make this thing work with read-only spans? It's a brilliant idea. So now you don't have to have this memory allocation anymore. What do I mean? Well, this method now becomes the following. Instead of having sum and link and whatever, you can just have your sum here, loop around the span, save the numbers, and run your method. Does the exact same thing, but it uses a read-only span, which actually behind the scenes is using, I think, the unsafe ref struct, or the allows ref struct. And all that's the magic. If I build and I go to IL viewer, is actually not allocating an array. It uses the scope to ref over here, read-only span. And as you can see, this points to some private implementation, super efficient create span nonsense. Basically, this is better. How do I know? I know by doing the following. I can just do this, and I can go and say console.get write line over here. And I'm going to basically revert this to the old version first, actually. So let's just undo all of that and go to the enumerable. I'm going to put this back here, and I'm going to debug it. So I'm going to start the debugger, and I'm going to load the memory of the application at this point before I call this method. So I'm going to say load classes, and as you can see, we have some memory over here. Now I'm going to step over this and reload memory. And as you can see, we have some allocations like, some characters, a character array, we have strings, we have objects, but we also have this over here, which is this integer 32 array. Now, this is the important thing. The rest of the stuff just doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it. If I go and I change all that to a read-only span and I do the exact same thing, then as you're going to see over here, and I'm going to load this, step over, load again, there is no integer array. No allocation, no nothing. It just works all fine. The reason we have these string allocations is this console write line. If this was sum, and then I just returned the integer, and let's say I printed it myself. So let's say var result over here. Come on, over here. And I just do this, and I debug it again. You're going to see I'm not going to have any string allocations or anything. Let's just showcase it again. We go on the memory tab. We say load memory. We step over this, we load memory again. The only thing allocated is int32, which is that integer, and then the runtime field info stub. If we're using the other way, this would also allocate an int32 array, making it more inefficient. But that's enough with spans. Let's go into some more practical things. And the biggest thing must be the new hybrid cache. What is the hybrid cache? Well, remember how you can have like a memory cache here in .NET, or maybe you can have and add distributed memory cache and link it to Redis or Garnet or Valky or whatever. Well, if you had something like this, you would go here and say, for example, memory cache, if I was to use the memory cache, and all this API is doing is it's getting a city and then it's returning the weather, but the weather is the same within like 5 minutes, unless you live in like, I don't know, London or something. So we can actually cache it for a few minutes. So this method becomes basically this, which is, do we have the response cached into the memory? Well, if we do, then return it through the cache. If not, then cache it for 5 minutes and then return it. And if we were to do this, this all works. I'm going to go to Insomnia. I'm going to go here and say, give me the weather for London. And now I have the weather for London. If I click it again, it is cached for 5 minutes. But if I say another city like Paris over here, it's going to, again, cache it for 5 minutes. It caches it by city name. Now that's great. But then we have the distributed cache, which is like you use some other distributed service provider to cache for distributed applications, which is great. But what if you want to have a common API to do both things? Well, you would use Fusion Cache, a NuGet package, which is excellent, by the way. But no, Microsoft said in .NET 9, we're going to add our own Fusion Cache thing and kill another library. And that one, basically, all it does is it combines your memory cache and your distributed cache under a simple common API. And then you can choose to cache things both distributed and locally, keep them locally. So if that service is unavailable, you can return it from a local cache, and so on. So how do you add this? Well, you can actually add it by adding a NuGet package. However, this NuGet package, this Microsoft.extensions.caching.hybrid, doesn't have a full .NET 9 version still. Like it is only pre-release. I can't find a full .NET 9 version. So I don't quite understand if it is available or not. The thing is, if you have it and you go and say builder.services.add hybrid cache, the compiler won't let you compile. It says you have to manually say compiler warning, disable it. I want to use this really. And I think that's because the API can still change. It's not officially out yet. They didn't have the time to do it because even Mark Gravels, who is largely behind this project and this library, even in his demo, he had this disabled pragma. So, this might not be production ready yet. In fact, it probably isn't production ready yet, but I'm showing it because I don't think it will change much. And to use it, basically you remove any, distributed cache or any other stuff, and you just inject the hybrid cache. So you're going to say hybrid cache over here, and we're going to change how we do this a bit. In fact, we're going to change this entire method because the API is quite significantly different. So we're going to say var response equals await hybrid cache, and you only have remove by tag when you can tag a cached entry with some value, set async, and get or create async. So there's no get async, there is no check if key exists stuff. Like, you're only using this and you're gonna like it. The way it works is you first pass down the city, and then you pass down the factory of generating the value if it doesn't exist. This basically means that I have to extract my weather retrieval logic into, in this case, a private method, which I'm going to use here. So we have the cancellation token, which I'm not passing in this case, but I'm going to show you it exists. And then I'm going to say create response. Now, keep in mind, this is async await, so you have to use value task over here, dot from result, and pass it down like this. And I'm also going to pass down some settings about this cache value. So I'm going to say expiration, time span from minutes, and I'm going to say 5. That's basically it. The reason why this doesn't work is because this needs to be async, and now it is. Also, this can be async await if you need to async await into the generation of the cached value thing. So this is also totally eligible. And now I have the response, and now I can say return results dot okay. And I'm gonna go here, and as you will see by me running it, this will all work. So I'm gonna go to Insomnia, call it again, get over there for Paris. It is cached, it all works. By default, it uses the iMemory cache, but you can actually go to NuGet and you can say, I don't know, Microsoft.extensions.caching, and you can add the Stack Exchange .redis over here. And by registering this and registering a distributed cache, it will also, or can be also, taken into account in your hybrid cache. And you don't really need to worry about what goes where. You can just configure all that. The hybrid cache method over here is highly configurable for things like default entry options, disable compression, maximum key length, and many, many others. But I'm not going to change any of that now. You can go as deep as you want with this feature. Now, the next one seems pretty small, and it actually is. It is basically JSON related. So what you can have is an object like this, and then you can have some serialization options. You might want to export the schema of that JSON file to describe a model in your service in a generic way for everyone that might want to consume that application. So what you can do is you can say options.get JSON schema as node, and then you can say type of the type you want to declare, so person. And what this will do is this will allow you to basically describe in plain text your JSON object. And I'm going to just run this, and as you're going to see, it all works. I have the type, it's an object, it can be null. It has a few properties, the full name, which is a string, and then a date of birth, a string, format date, and so on. Why would Microsoft add this? Well, they added this because in .NET 9, that's a segue into a new feature, they removed Swagger stuff. So you no longer have what you had previously, which is this one where you have add Swagger gen, add endpoints, API Explorer, use Swagger gen, use UI. That pretty UI you remember, let me just remind you if you've forgotten. Remember this? This is no longer in .NET 9. You have to explicitly go and add the NuGet packages and add it. What did we get in return? Well, actually something really cool. We got a way more stripped down version that only gives you the document itself, the OpenAPI document. So if I go to OpenAPI v1 and JSON, now I get this. I get OpenAPI version and then description of my endpoints and description of my data. So schemas with a forecast, it is a type object, properties, date, type format. This is all made possible because they made this exporter. So now if you're using any .NET 9 API, you're going to have to deal with this. And the last thing that I'm going to mention is that we now also get a GUID.create version 7 new GUID instead of the version 4 of the traditional new GUID. Why would you do that? Well, you might do that because this is now an ordered GUID. So if I was to create all of these and I run this, what you're going to see is these 3 GUIDs generated, these UUIDs, will all be sequential and ordered by their first bits. This is just for database efficiency. It's used widely in the distributed world as well. It is a great addition. Many people might not use it. I definitely use it already. It's just absolutely lovely. And that's all the features I want to show. I will potentially make a video, let me know if you want, to talk about more ASP.NET Core stuff, Blazor stuff, EF Core stuff. Just leave a comment down below and let me know. Well, that's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, keep coding.